Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here on Black Star Network. Are you tired of being sick and tired? Often filled with triggers, trauma, tragedy, and not really sure how to get to your space of triumph? Well, today we're talking to Charlotte Avery, our mom strategist who actually has a PhD in motherhood. We're going to dive in today on what it looks like to find your lane in your space, but also measure those little wins, the wins that allow you to see that you are making strides in your life, that you can move forward, and that this temporary thing that happened in your life doesn't necessarily define you. Welcome in, Charlotte Avery.
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
how are you doing?
Today is a good day.
Today is a good day. And that's a good thing because some days are not so good. And oftentimes for good reason, we can think of reasons why days are not so good. But let's talk about that for a little while. Today, on our show, we're going to be talking about a survivor's journey, trauma, triggers, and triumphs. And sometimes it's difficult to determine where you are in your season of life. So, Charlotte, if you could unpack that just for a bit for us. How can people gauge where they are? Are they in a trauma season? Are they in a triggered season? Are they in a triumph season?
That is such a really, really good question, Dr. Jacquie. So for me, what I would say is I think your body tells a lot. Mm-hmm. Your body and how you react. Even in your physical and emotional health, I think it helps to give a good gauge of where you are. When you are in a season of, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. When you're in a season of triumph and, just feeling very, very victorious because you've overcome something, you're no longer feeling like you're in a stage of fight or flight. And you're just really able to just kind of let your hair down and breathe and be in a place of gratitude, a place of, you're no longer in a place of I'm going through, you're in a place of I've been through and I've overcome. And that is such a beautiful place to be because you can breathe easier, you walk different, you talk different because everything about you and how you move even looks and sounds triumphant. When it comes to trauma, we wear our traumas, we feel our traumas, and our bodies even ooze our trauma. I have a little story. So one time it was a Super Bowl one time, and I had this really bad pain in my abdomen, and I was wondering where it came from. And I kept asking, why was I feeling this particular way? And I ended up having to go to the emergency room at Dark 30. Come to find out after, doing some x-rays and then looking at some things, they were telling me that I had something going on with my gallbladder. And so I was like, I've never had gallbladder issues or anything like that. So then I left there because, I believe in medicine. I also believe in holistic medicine. So then I ended up going to see my chiropractor. And I was telling her what was going on. I was telling her, I said, girl, they are trying to take out my gallbladder and I need all my organs, right? And so what she told me, because she asked me, what I had been going through, like even emotionally. And what I found out is that we hold trauma and stress and things like that in our gallbladder. So how people say, well, you have a lot of gall. It's because of your gallbladder. That statement comes from that. And so I found out that, I had been in a season of turmoil and it was being stored up in my gallbladder. So I had to really go through like some detoxing emotionally, physically, and all the things to really get my gallbladder straight. So usually when I'm like having a really bad day or I'm angry or anything like that, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't only just show in my face, but I can feel it in my body.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful because how we say, I got that gut feeling. Mm-hmm. How to steer clear of danger, steer clear of those things that are not good for you, whether it's people, places, or things. And in our bodies, that gallbladder, it plays that similar role of that gut feeling of knowing how to move away from things. When you talk about trauma, one of the things that I heard you say was having this underlying ability to trust. And oftentimes people not only will not identify their trauma, they also will not share their traumatic experiences because they don't have people in their circle who they can trust.
Absolutely.
For people, in our spaces, and especially in our communities, women specifically, coming to a place of trusting others with the things that we carry isn't easy. So how do you develop trust, or how do you develop trust, and how do you teach your children, to develop trust so that when they're going through something, they can share it so they can begin to move through it?
One of the things that I did, and I learned to do this over time, especially after becoming a mom, is I developed a support system and a community. And my community were people, and they still are, they're not just were, they are people who I knew that I could really be naked and unashamed. Like there was no judgment, there was no, just finger pointing or anything like that, but people who I could really pick up the phone and say, you know what, I'm going through and I need you to pray for me. I need you to give me an opportunity to just vent, cuss, scream, kick, and cry. I need you to be a listening ear. And the thing is that support systems don't just gradually happen. Support systems and tribes happen over time, and they're trial and error. Everything is trial and error, even when it comes to support systems and people that you trust. And so one thing that I told my children, because, my children are they're very affectionate, they're very touchy-feely, they're very friendly people. And some of my children, they've gotten their feelings hurt because they were like, well, I trusted, so-and-so and whatever. And so I tell my children, just like with me, you have to be gradual with your trust. You can't just go out and kind of have diarrhea of the mouth and tell people, all of these things that are going on. You tell people a little bit of information just so you don't. So even if it's something that goes somewhere, it's not something that's so huge that you feel like, oh, well, if it's going to be a big deal if everybody finds this out. And so I tell my children, just like I do with my own self, I share a little bit at a time. And then over time, I see who can handle what information. So trust and support systems are so very important in our community as people, but especially for women, because what happens is we and silos are just these places where you have moments of silence, you feel inadequate, only you don't tune you what they need much taboo that we can't actually tell the truth. Because the reality of it is that we would have, I think people would be more trusting to share their traumas if they also knew that they had a sense of community and people who would really hold their arms up and allow them the space and the grace to really just share. But if I don't share, which, I'm a very transparent person, but if I don't share my traumas, then I'm not only doing myself a disservice, but I'm doing the community of women and people around me a disservice, because guess what? You end up sharing when you know that somebody else has been through something that you're going through. But a lot of times we live in a secret society of womanhood and motherhood because we want to live and appear to be these perfect people that are not flawed or whatever, because if we do, then the media are going to talk, our family members are going to talk, and all these different things. And then we just get so caught up and trapped in our trauma, and we have to let that go.
Letting go isn't easy. And you bring up a very valid point, because we often say, I don't want this to come back to me, or I don't want this to come back on me. And inevitably, there's always somebody, whether it's friends, family, coworkers, neighbor, your groups, your friend set, whatever, they always throw things back in your face when they're going through a difficult time, which often lets you know when other people are triggered by your overcoming. Because it's like they can't believe that, how dare you heal and I not heal. And
Absolutely.
so oftentimes dealing with trauma, it's hard because you want to put yourself out there. You don't want to feel sad, tired, and lonely and all of those things and live in isolation. About for work trauma. What is their
Face with it? First of all, please don't tackle it alone. Don't tackle it alone. Find a person, a friend that you like, know, and trust. Find a therapist that you can talk to, because sometimes even the people that you like, know, and trust, you might not feel comfortable at that particular time, wherever you are in your process. You might not feel comfortable talking to your community of people in your circles. So finding a therapist is really good. Finding a person of faith that you can trust also would be really, really good. But I have to tell you, I'm a person, I have this t-shirt a friend of mine gave me a while ago that says Jesus plus therapy. And I am one of these people. I believe that, you know what, we need Jesus and we need therapy too. Therapy is good. Therapy has been my friend. And let me tell you, my family thanks God for my therapist, because I'm going to tell you, it has saved their lives. Mine too. But it has. My therapist has really saved me from, really just having some explosive moments and things like that. And so, I say Jesus plus therapy is a good thing. Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a great place to end this segment. When we come back after the break, let's dive in a little bit more about how you can turn your trauma into triumph, but at the same time, recognize on that journey, before you get there, you just might be triggered. Some of y'all are living triggered right now. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
See their community, let's scale the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. And as you can see, Charlotte Avery, our mom strategist who has a PhD in motherhood, and of course, all other things related to how we move our lives forward. It's important to recognize that trauma is something you get through and you go through. But if you never acknowledge it, then you oftentimes don't find a safe space with safe people in order to get on your safe passage to triumph. So, Charlotte, let's talk a little bit about triggers. And I know it's a hot button word. People use it all the time. And girl, I was triggered. They were triggering me. I just keep getting triggered. All of its forms, the word trigger comes at us, sometimes silently and sometimes violently. When you think of the word triggered and its definition, what comes to mind? Does that play out for you as a reaction and an emotion? Is it a mental state? What can that appear in its many forms to various people?
Triggers come in so many different forms. I mean, physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and they come in so many forms. But you know what? One of the things that I remember somebody saying this a few years ago, and this is how you really know if you're dealing with triggers or you are triggered. I heard somebody say this brilliant statement. They said, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if you keep going through and dealing with the same thing that's triggering you over and over and over again, you've got to really ask yourself, what is the history behind that? Because usually when people are triggered, they get really riled up in their emotions and they're dealing with it in their bodies. And, sometimes there's crying, there's screaming, they're yelling, they're doing some inappropriate behaviors or whatever. But it comes from somewhere. And so if it's continuing to happen, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And so you have to be able to do your work and find the people who will help you do your work to ask yourself, what is the history behind this trigger that keeps coming up over and over and over again? Because until you deal with your trigger, it's going to deal with you.
I like that. I'm going to add to that because there is another word that we often heard growing up. And, we don't use this word in our generation, but our parents and grandparents would often say, could you stop with the histrionics already? And today that translates into people being dramatic and drama queens, because those terms say, as you said, I'm reliving history. There's something that is still irking my soul, that is embedded in my psyche, that ping something in my mind that causes me to have this behavior, whether it's I shut down, whether I get depressed, whether I lash out at other people. It formulates from some place of a thing that is yet to be resolved.
Yes.
And this history of being hysterical and having histrionics, how do we get to resolution if we're not talking? And communicating with each other about what we're dealing with on a daily basis.
But this is the thing, is that we don't get a place of healing and resolve if we're stuffing it. Mm-hmm. If we're continuing to stuff it, then we're going to just continue to be these tsunamis and volcanoes exploding and bleeding on people who really love us and care about us, or want to love us and care about us, but they can't because we keep dealing and going through the motions over and over again silently because we're not talking about it. And that's one thing that's so beautiful about this show today, is that, you know what, we get to give people permission. It's not like they have to have our permission, but sometimes people need to hear, you know what, it is okay to talk about whatever your it is. It really is okay. And may I just be transparent? When I wrote my book, The 40-Day Tone of Voice Tone Down, I had to do a lot of work before I wrote that book, because I tell everybody, my name is Charlotte Avery. I'm a recovering yeller. When people see me and they see my stature, they're like, girl, you are not a yeller. And I'm like, oh, I was like my own homewrecker, But the thing is that I really had to do work to then say, you know what, I'm going to take people on a 40-day journey so that we can stop yelling and acting a fool in our own households, at work, and all these different places. But what I found is the thing that really got me to the place of writing that book was my own history of what I had been through in a traumatic situation with my grandmother. She's no longer living, but for a few different seasons of my life that were pivotal, I was raised in a household with a very verbally, physically, emotionally abusive grandparent. And I have no problem saying this openly because my mama knows. I mean, it was her mama, but and my mom's read my book too. But until I really dealt with that, and the history and the pathology behind why I was yelling, which really stemmed from my grandmother, not my mother, because my mom is not a yeller at all. But when I had to dig really deep and say, well, gosh, why am I shutting down? Why am I lashing out? Why do I feel inadequate? When you're raised by somebody who makes you feel like you're nothing, who, because, I had some challenges reading and things of that nature. I felt inadequate being held back in the second grade. People don't know these things about me, but you get to learn these things about me today. But dealing with these places and spaces at such a young age, I didn't realize how those seeds were so deeply planted in me that even as I evolved as a teenager and a young adult and a wife and a mother, I did not realize the level of trauma that I experienced until I had to check myself about all of the yelling and out of controlness that I was being within my own household, with my own family. And I was tired, y'all. I was tired of always apologizing for my bad behavior. And I had to deal with me and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I hurting the people that I love? My amazing husband, my beautiful children, why? And until I dealt with the why behind it, until I dealt with the pathology behind it, until I dealt with my own trauma that continued to resurface over and over again, I was not going to be healed. I was not going to be happy. I was not going to be healthy. And neither were the people around me. And so it's so important to find your people, your person. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, but find your person who you can sit with and talk to and cry with and be able to say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of being tired. I want to deal with me so that I can be better for me while also being better for others.
I think that this conversation and dialogue today brings us to that space. And this is the thread. An audience, whether you want to at me, believe me, or do whatever you want to do, Charlotte just gave us that thread that runs through our lives. Childhood trauma follows us. Mm-hmm. And there are people who will not send their children to therapy. There are young adults seeking therapy, but can't often get the help that they need for a variety of reasons in the society that we live in today. We talk about it as if it's a bad thing. But as you get older, both men and women are still carrying that baggage of these traumas that they've had. And they're triggered every day by a sight, a sound, someone else's voice, a smell, a place, a thing, whatever it is. There's so much happening around us in our culture that oftentimes we forget that there's a little kid in us who is still hiding somewhere in a corner in our mind saying, please don't let that happen to me. Please don't take me to this space. Please don't let me be around these people. I don't want to go into this environment. Charlotte, in what ways, and I know you have a new book coming out, so talk to us about that as well. How do you help your children as they're growing not carry their childhood traumas with them? Because our kids, be honest, audience, are away from us more hours of the day than they are with us. So they're experiencing things that you'll never know about until they're triggered. Yes. So how do you help them help themselves in this season of their lives?
One of the best ways to help your children is to be a very good listener. Like, don't be so attached to your technology and the circumstances that are going on around in your own world, and understand, and I'm not minimizing the things that we go through as parents, because we go through a whole lot with our children and, in the workplace and all these different things. But when you become a good listener and you start listening to the things that your children are telling you, the things that they're feeling, when you get curious and you ask your children, about things that are happening or going on. And, and you're not just asking them open-ended questions that would be like, well, how was your day? Good. Well, okay, it was good. What was good about it? Tell me 3 things that were good about your day. When you start having conversations and you become a good listener, then it kind of gives you your inner thinker, what I feel like I call it down in your shanana. You start like really kind of getting the discernment to say, you know what, my child is going through something. And here's the deal. I want to say this to parents. If your children come to you and they start talking to you about things that might be loaded conversations, and they tell you that they feel like they need to go to therapy, or they're telling you, some things that you feel like you don't have the capacity to deal with, if you prevent your children from getting into therapy and getting the help they need, then as much as I love the work that I do with parents, I want to gently say this: you are part of the problem. And what happens is, and I know this for a fact because we are not perfect people. And and especially in African-American households, what goes on in the house stays in the house and all of that. That's a whole different level of trauma. Okay. But here's the thing. When your kids start telling you about some things that you don't even have the capacity to handle, you as a parent need to know when to refer your child to somebody who is not you. And that does not make you an inadequate. It doesn't make you a bad parent. And yes, some of the trauma that your children are going through probably has to do with you. Because I'm going to tell you, when some of my children started going through big therapy, I was part of their problem. I already told y'all I was a yeller. I was out of control sometimes and all these different things. But my children needed to talk to somebody about me. And guess what? I was okay with that. And you have to be okay with saying, you know what, I don't have the capacity to do this. And be honest, yes, I have done some things that may have caused trauma in the lives of my children. And so, yes, my children need to work that out with somebody who is not me. And that doesn't make you a bad parent. That actually makes you a really great parent when you can really take yourself and step yourself aside and know when to refer and say, you know what? I need my child to go into therapy. My child has asked me to go into therapy. And sometimes your children don't want to go into therapy because they're just, even though they know they need to, but sometimes our children are just like, well, I don't want people to think my mom or my dad is a bad parent. It's not that we're not perfect parents. And yes, sometimes we do some out of control, bad, inappropriate things. But when you can acknowledge it, and you can now say to your children, I'm sorry, and now I'm going to refer you and put you in this situation with somebody who you can trust and talk to, you're giving your children one of the biggest gifts ever. So please, please, please be a good listener.
Be a good listener. When we come back, y'all, after the break, we're going to continue this conversation and then move into not only dealing with more of your triggers, but also how do you move toward triumph? And what does that look like in your life? We'll be back in a moment after the break.
They said the quiet part out loud. Black votes are a threat, so they erased them. After the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, Republican legislatures moved fast. New voter ID laws, polling place shutdowns, purges of black voters from the rolls. Trump's Justice Department didn't stop it, they joined in. In 2018, his DOJ backed Ohio's voter purge system, a scheme that disproportionately erased black voters. Their goal, erase black votes and political power. Yeah, that happened. These are the kinds of stories that we cover every day on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Subscribe on YouTube and download the Black Star Network app. Support fact-based independent journalism that centers African Americans and the issues that matter to our community.
Hey, Charlotte. So girl, you just gave us the fullness of everything that it would take for people to get on this good path to balancing out their lives. You know, I had trauma. I am triggered and I trigger other people because of my trauma. As a parent, as a wife, as a businesswoman, you navigate a lot of things. How do we help people put into perspective this adulting that we do as adults when our children go through things? Because people tend to forget it's not just our kid or our niece, our nephews, our cousins, our other relatives going through a thing. We as caregivers go through the thing with them. How do we unpack that and help people navigate their space when they come alongside someone who's had a trauma and is continually triggered?
Whew, very, very good question. So when you're going alongside someone, especially when it's somebody who you love, their trauma can also become your trauma. And when that happens, you have to be able to acknowledge that and know what is happening, when it's happening, what you're feeling in the process. And as you're helping support them, also get the support that you need so that you can continue to support them. Because here's the thing, as people grow and evolve, and you have you get to have a bird's eye view, you get to be right there in the thick of it with them. There are times where they're going through some things that can cause you to be triggered yourself. And so when you're doing that, it's really important for you to acknowledge that, you know what, you're going through this and I hear you, but it's also okay to say, you know what, I'm going to take a slight respite for myself so that I can still help you grow and evolve and develop.
That development, Charlotte, when I think about my own, growth and development, teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, now entering, in the 60s, there's these various stages of growth and how we see things. Our spiritual maturity is there. It has to match our age. And oftentimes people shy away from faith as a part of their growth because it wasn't a part of their early childhood journey. But then there's some kids who grew up in the faith and they know how to attach scripture to a thing, and that sense of beckoning for them to see it as urgent. How should parents navigate? For those of you who are watching, this segment portion is for you, because some of our children have stepped away from faith. When I get old, I'm not going to go to church. I'm not going to do this, that, and the other. They drugged me when I was little. But the word says, thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee. And sometimes we need to draw on our faith as a way to cope with the things that we go through every day. How do we help our audience value that perspective of just hold on? Just hold on.
Yes, holding on is so important. And the thing is that we go through so many things in our world that would make us want to let go. But it's the holding on when we really, really hold on, when we really dig deep. And, when things are brought back to our remembrance, like you were saying, thy word have I hid in my heart that I would not sin against you. Even the scripture that says, train your child up in the way that they should go. And when they are old, they will not depart from it. As a parent, there are scriptures that I hold tight to when it comes to my children, because our children are PKs. We have 7 children. Our children are PKs, and 3 of our children, they are emerging adults. I have a 21-year-old right now, a 20-year-old, and an 18-year-old, and they are not here at home. So for me, I have to ask myself, and I end up finding myself asking my friends who have children who are emerging adults this too, is do you believe God's word or you don't? Do you or don't you believe it? Like, what did God say? Because at the end of the day, these scriptures are not just there to be lip service or book service or Bible service or to be really good, preaching points. It's really, do you believe that you've trained your children up in the way that they should go so that then when they're old, they won't depart from it? And I have to believe that because, listen, I can't monitor my children, my grown teenagers, emerging adults. I can't be with them all the time. And so my thing is, as they're growing and evolving, I have to realize that they have to walk out their soul salvation. They have to walk out adulthood and these seasons of life to the best of their ability, and let them know that, you know what, I am here. And when you need to talk to me, your dad or your trusted person, we're here too. But for me, I have to hold on to what I know in my faith and what God has told me and the promises that God has made me about my children and who they're going to be, as they continue to grow and evolve. And I'm telling you, that can be a really hard thing when you see your children and hear them making some decisions and choices that you are just like, oh my gosh, why? Even like decisions and choices that you may have made back in your own day. And you're just like, I really didn't want my children to experience this. But you have to understand and believe that God's word is true. And you've got to be able to hold on to the faith that's gotten you from one level to the next level to the next level, knowing that same God was the same God then, he's the same God now, and he's the same God with you, and he's the same God with your children. And nobody can watch God better than God. I mean, nobody can watch your children better than the Lord can. And so, we lose sleep over our children. We cry over our children. We do so many different things as it pertains to our children. We lament. We go through all these different things. But I'm telling you, for parents who are parents of faith, if you just trust and believe, what God says, knowing that he will never leave you nor forsake you, and nor will that same God never leave or forsake your children.
And that's super important because, triggers are like an earthquake and having aftershocks. When a person gets triggered, there's this aftershock. It's the living through day to day what you've been through. And for those of you who are like, what are they talking about? It could be any number of things. As a nation, we were all triggered, if you were alive, with 9/11. Mm-hmm. Things changed in our lives, going through the airport, taking off our shoes, looking side eye at people, clutching our purses and our pearls, depending on the time of day it is. You don't want to go out at night. You don't want to go out too early in the morning because now you're triggered. For those of you who used to be joggers and runners, you're triggered about being out at certain times of day in certain areas. And so oftentimes it's the indirect impact of things that are happening in the world that we don't realize how we have changed how we function, changed how we move. A lot of people used to vacation by themselves. Now they're taking girls trips and, guy trips and young adult trips. People no longer do things alone that they used to do because the world that we live in has sort of put us aback, towards saying, oh, I can do whatever I want. And whereas you can, you always think twice about whether or not you're going to do it. And so let's see how I want to phrase this, because I think that these triggers and the aftermath of them keep us from healing.
Oh, they do. Oh my gosh, they do keep us from healing. But not only that, they cause us to bleed on other people. I mean, how many times have you been through something or trauma? And let me not even ask you. Let me talk about me. There are things that I have experienced through my life, whether it's my childhood, my, being a teenager, adulthood, or whatever. And those things have caused me to, I don't want to necessarily say bleed on my children or people around me, but it's made me be very paranoid and apprehensive and all of these different things. And so now, like when my kids are like, well, Mom, why can't I do this? Or Mom, why can't I do that? And I realize it's because I have now put the things that caused me trauma and have triggered me onto my children because I'm afraid that they're going to go and experience these things. And so it really prevents us from fully living our lives whole, because we're not whole yet. But I think when we get to these places of being healed and whole, when we can experience being healthy and happy, and not just happy, because happy is one thing, joy is another. When you start getting to a place where you're not just living in happiness and happenstance, but your triggers have now, you've really done your work, and now you can really live your life out wholly and in a healthy way, then life just gets so much sweeter. And then it's not that we don't want to be cautious, because we do, but we're able to trust a little bit more. We're able to sometimes give our children a little bit more leniency and kind of open up our hand and let them kind of start to spread their wings and fly. But if we don't, then we're going to just keep holding them here, and we're going to want them never to grow up, knowing that they have to grow up to experience all these different things, just like we did. And so, yeah, when we are dealing with these places and spaces of trauma and triggers, and we don't do our work, it goes from generation to generation to generation. And at some point you have to ask yourself, when do you want the cycle to stop? Because the cycle can stop with you.
Let's talk about that. When we come back after the break, let's dive into what the pathway to triumph looks like. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can say, you can stay triggered for a very long time. It's a part of the healing process. It's a part of the journey, because your trauma doesn't necessarily define you, but your trauma does shape you. And in moving through that process, let's dive into the steps to triumphancy. What does it look like to be healed and whole and moving forward on your life's journey? Charlotte, Avery, getting to this space of being triumphant in itself, it is a journey. And people are often looking for these access points of, is this a good time? Is this a good space? How do you know that you should be ready to come toward healing? How long is too long to let festering fester, if you will, and you say, you know what? There's a greater outlook and I'm ready to start searching for it.
Gosh, Dr. Jacquie, that can be such a loaded question, because it's, we don't want to, I want to be careful in how I answer that, because my time and what got me to where I am in my place of healing and my journey, my time limit might be different for somebody else, from somebody else's journey. And so I want to say that people's journey and their time limit is really personal and idiosyncratic to them. But what I do want to say is, when you get to a place where you feel like you're continuing to be stifled and you're not growing, and you feel and can see within your body that things are happening that you just can't shake, and you can't even heal physically from some things, like you're always sick or whatever, usually that's a sign that you've got some inner work that you need to do. And so if you keep spinning your wheels and going through the same things over and over and over again, and like you even said, Dr. Jacquie, when you're tired of being sick and tired, then you're going to do your work, because here's the thing. You're either going to do your work or you're going to continue to make excuses to try to justify why you're not moving forward. And my question is, are you tired of being stuck? Don't you want to move forward? Don't you want to live in triumph? Don't you want to live and really be more than a conqueror? When you really get to that place, like when you really, really get there, you're going to do your work. My hope and my prayer is that people get there sooner and later, because people are waiting for you. People need you to be your healthy self, and you need to be your healthy self first before you can be your healthy, before anybody else can really receive that part of you. And so for me, I'm just like, when you get to the place, because I believe everybody gets to their place of enough is enough, and I'm just sick of myself. I'm sick of spinning my wheels. And then they'll be ready to do their work.
And I think that that's the great space when we talk about what does tangible hope look like. Oftentimes people think that hope is not something you can measure because it feels like this ethereal thing that's somewhere out there in the universe and you're just trying to grasp and grasp and grasp. But tangible hope is just what you're describing. I'm calling a thing is first. And then maybe calling this thing a thing, it allows me to then see or seek clarity toward the direction I need to be moving in, away from what has been triggering me from my traumatic experience. But that other part of that tangibility is I can measure how far I've come from my trauma and my trigger. Measurement, Charlotte. What are some ways that you measure your wins from, we'll go with having been a yeller? How did you know that you had stopped being a yeller? Because sometimes people don't know how to measure. They just blow off, oh, that was nothing. I just did this, that, and the other. But look how far you've come because you did this, that, and the other. So how do we help people measure tangible hope?
One of the ways we can help people measure tangible hope and knowing that we really are like getting to where we need to be is self-acknowledgement, but also when other people around us who've been around us for a long period of time can also see and hear the change and the difference in who you're becoming. I'll give you a story. One time, after I'd gone through, the 40-day tone of voice, tone down journey. And what I did is I was very transparent. I told my family about it. I told them what I was doing. I gave my children like pieces of paper and I let them write me tickets so that if, I could get a parking ticket. So if I raised my voice, if I was yelling throughout the house, that they could write me a ticket. If I hurt their feelings with my words, they could write me a ticket, say, Mommy, you yelled and this is what you yelled about, whatever. When I started receiving less tickets, when my children knew that there were things that I actually should have blown up about, or that I would have normally like flown off my handle, but they saw me like breathe and dig deep and not yell and say, you know what, I think we need to take a different look at this and see why this is happening. And I really started I was being self-aware, but because I was being self-aware, they acknowledged that I was being self-aware. And it was so funny because my kids would say, good job, Mom. You didn't yell. Good job, Mom. I thought you were going to get upset about this, but you didn't. And even to my husband, he would even say to me, babe, that you did a really good job. And I'd be like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, normally you would have flown off the handle about this, but you didn't. And I think when you also give people permission to talk to you about your growth and development, but even when you don't, but people say, this person, they're really changing. They're really growing and evolving. It's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. So that's one thing. The other thing is really just taking inventory, being able to take an inventory of yourself. And like you were saying, like seeing your wins, really being able to give yourself grace, but also saying, you know what, I'm not doing this, I've moved and I've progressed forward, and now I'm continuing to evolve and grow. And that's a really beautiful thing too, to be able to say, I'm not what I used to be. But I'm, you know, what we say in church, Jackie, I can't even remember the saying right now, but you know, I'm not back there, but I've moved forward. And I just think it's so important for us to be able to see it and acknowledge it. But I think it's something also even more special when other people can see it and acknowledge our growth too.
I think that's wonderful. I'm not what I supposed to be, but I'm not where I used to be.
There you go. Thank you.
Great phraseology, because what Charlotte has been describing is what post-traumatic growth looks like. And that post-traumatic growth leads us toward a space of healing, recognizing that healing is not linear. I mean, it can take you up, it can take you down, it can take you back to where you first started, but you're moving through a journey, you're moving, through a process that allows you to say, as Charlotte said, I'm not back at square one. I am moving along. So maybe I'm not, quite at Z yet, but at least I'm moving through the alphabet of my emotions and my feelings, and I'm giving myself grace.
Yes.
That's a part of the triumphant journey. Talk to us about giving yourself grace, because you can't give grace to other people if you don't first give yourself grace.
But isn't that what we do? Like we like give people more space and grace to do all kinds of things, and we don't give it to ourselves. And being able to give yourself grace, even when you do take 2 steps back, you're like, dang, you know what? I had taken all these steps forward, and now I've taken 2 steps back. But you've got to be able to remember, you know what? Be good. You have to be able to be good to yourself, but you also have to be able to give yourself permission to be human.
Mm-hmm. Amen, sister.
Because we don't do that. Like, we just let everybody else be out here. We just let them be out in these streets, like being human. And we just think that they're human, but we're human too. So why is it that we give other people more grace than we give ourselves? And then we're harder on ourselves. And yes, understand, I have really great expectations of myself. I do. I really do. But, it's like when you ask me today, how was I doing? And I said, today is a good day. Every day is not a good day. And it's okay to acknowledge that we have these moments that we do take 2 steps back. But taking 2 steps back, just because I took 10 steps forward, I didn't take a whole 10 steps back. So we cheer ourselves and we become our own cheerleaders. And we say, you know what? I did take 2 steps back, but good for me. I didn't take 10.
Absolutely. Our trauma and our triggers and our road to being triumphant, those are just things that help us in life's journey, because it is an integration of things. It's a moment in time. And oftentimes people let tragedy experiences define who they are. I know we're getting ready to close, but can you talk to us just a bit about the danger of allowing one thing to define you, but also how that one thing can shape you toward a positive future?
Yes. So the danger in allowing something to define you is that it will kind of have a chokehold on you, and you will never grow. It will stifle you, and it has the ability to keep you down and keep you from really fulfilling the plans that God has for you in your life. And even if you don't want to say God, it really prevents you from fulfilling the great expectations that you have for yourself. And so the thing is that what I realized is there are things that held me captive and traumatized me that I may not have wanted to talk about then. But the beautiful part about it now is that I get to do what I love. Like, I'm here talking to Dr. Jacquie about my trauma and things that have happened and how to overcome those things, because even though I went through those things have allowed me to evolve and become the beautiful person that I am today. And because I am who I am today, I'm not staying there, but now I'm able to help so many people who will see our show and who will see it beyond the day that it's aired. And so it's so beautiful to know that, yeah, you did have some trauma, that you did have some triggers, but the triumph and the trophy comes in the fact that when you decide to be transparent, you get to grow and evolve and help so many other people. Because listen, what you went through was not just for you, boo.
Okay, that is a great way to end this segment. Everybody being Charlotte Avery. When we come back after the break, I'll give my reflection.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can tell, you don't have to live daily traumatized by the things that you have gone through in your life. It is simply just another tool in your toolkit, a stepping stone on your path and your journey toward getting to where you were meant to be. Because if we're honest, if we never went through anything, we would really never fully evolve into the people that we were meant to be. These grace gifts that we give ourselves every day, even in spite of our trauma and our tragedy and our triggers, it propels us forward to seek greatness, to show the enemy that he did not win or prevail, and that we are going to grow into the grace and the knowledge of all the things that we were destined and designed to be. I hope that something we have said today will help you move forward in life. Find your access point beyond your trauma. Allow yourself to be graced through your triggers and move in to the triumph that was meant to be yours. Because in the end, it allows others to live their own testimony. Thank y'all for watching. Bye now.